For many ministry leaders, the fear isn't just leaving a role, it's wondering whether you're leaving your calling altogether. So we often tie God's purpose to a place or a position or even a ministry assignment, but what happens when God changes the context while leaving the calling intact? Nate and Brittany Bruns thought that they were building a life in Germany. They spent years serving as missionaries, investing in relationships, raising their family overseas, and helping people encounter Jesus in a deeply post-Christian culture. And then God brought them home. And what followed was grief, culture shock, hard decisions, and a growing realization that the mission hadn't ended, it just simply moved. So this is a conversation about calling and transition and learning to trust God when He changes the map, but not the destination. Thanks for listening. This is the Life After Ministry podcast. All right, Nate and Brittany Bruns, welcome. This is the Life After Ministry podcast. I'm excited because you are the first couple that we've had on here that have been missionaries. And I say that in the past tense. And so let's hear a little bit of your story, because if you are a missionary, you know change of circumstance. As an American couple, what moved you in the first place to say we want to go serve in Germany?
First, thanks for having us, Matt. It's good to join you today.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Honestly, God moved us through job loss. He decided that He wanted to tell us something new, and we weren't hearing that really clearly. And so He led us into a desert wandering season. I was in pharmaceutical sales for years, and we just spent time when I lost my job, really spent a few months just going, God, we don't know what's next, but we know you're doing something new. And so we just want to hear you in that. And wherever you are is where we want to be. And ultimately, as we were on a mission trip to Germany, He started putting together pieces to say all these things that I've been growing in you. The trust for me, for direction, for provision, for strength. This has all been part of getting you to this place where you'd be willing to give me your yes to coming to Germany and working with this German church plant over here. And that's really how we ended up where we were. It wasn't on our radar at all.
No, I laugh and lovingly say we are the least likely missionaries. We live in an area here in the United States that's well known for its country music stars and its wealthy authors and musicians and all of those things. And we were living our best Williamson County life here. And the Lord really just started to change that trajectory. I can honestly say that 15 months of desert wandering was really our training ground for what was coming next. And as we look back, and once we launched into the field, we kept going back to those previous 15 months and recalling the things that the Lord had given us. We referred to them as our memory stones. And we had to keep going back to those memory stones and often holding them and rubbing them between our fingers to remind us of the truths of what it was that God had taught us during that season.
So you guys really got into this idea of how do we reach, I think most people think missionaries and you're talking to people who are wearing tribal outfits and bones through their noses. And so and while that certainly can be true in some parts of the world, you're reaching a post-Christian culture. What does that look like? And you guys are in Germany at the point of that's where you were serving. But how did that look? What did ministry look like over there?
Yeah, relationship. In one word, really, what we did was so much relational ministry. It was getting to know people, getting to know the questions they had, getting to know their life story, getting to know the language they were speaking and using, literally and metaphorically, and truly just caring about people right where they are, to then allow that to earn the right to be able to have some of those deeper conversations about spirituality, about God, about the gospel.
So we were in a season that in that 15 months that we could tell that the Lord was developing something in us, and we had done serving inside the church separately, and the Lord was asking us to go do something that was serving the Lord together in that season. And a pastor way early in our marriage had said to us, if you want to do something incredible for your marriage, go on a mission trip together. And in this desert wandering season, we knew we needed to go on a mission trip together. And as we started to do that research, do you want to share about what the Lord said to you about huts and wells.
Yeah.
He said, the Lord was clearly calling us to go to Germany, and it meant sitting in a coffee shop relating to people. And Nate laughed, and he was like, "That's an iPad mission trip. I don't want to go do an iPad mission trip. I'm supposed to dig a well and build a hut." And the Lord told him so kindly and said, "I need people to go dig a well and build a hut. But that's not what I need you to do. I have created you to live in relationship with people. And I need you to go and sit in that coffee shop and relate to people." And it's a mindset shift inside of that. We think mission work and missionaries have to go and sacrifice it all and go live with big spiders. And so many of them do. And that's this beautiful calling and sacrifice that they have. And equally, the Lord's created people to live relationally inside people in first world countries to share the gospel over cups of coffee. That is equally just as much as a sacrifice.
Yeah. Okay, so you're on the field in Germany and you guys are there for 6 years and you come back to the States for a period of time. And during that time, the decision is made that you're not going back. What is that decision like?
Really difficult. We had, coming back stateside for our year of home assignment, we'd set up our life to go back to Germany and to keep working there. We loved the life we had there. We loved the people that we did life with there. We came back and just said, "Okay, God, you, while we were there in Germany, have kind of broken our heart for what was happening in our home country during that time, kind of being on the outside, looking back in. There were just things going on that we just thought, man, it just breaks my heart to see some of the tension that's happening between the church and people outside the church." And so we just said, if this is you changing our story, if you want to tell us anything different, this is the time for us to hear that. And we're listening and we're willing to follow you wherever. We said that when we went. But for now, our plan is to go back because you haven't told us anything different. So if you've got something different to say, we're here to listen to that.
While we were here that year stateside, we had an opportunity to do a season of rest and completely step out of all ministry work. The Lord clearly said in that, "You have been doing for me, and I want you to just be with me." And in that season of being with him, he started to speak really clear things. And one of the things was he wanted us to answer, what did it look like to be a missionary in your own home country? And as we started to explore what that looked like, we started to have realization that the Lord was getting ready to ask us to make a really hard transition. He also asked us to start looking individually of the totality of our family and what members of our family needed as well. And that was a really hard wrestle because we knew that if we made the determination to stay stateside, it would absolutely just devastate our kids as well as us. And yet he was really making it clear and obvious that this decision to stay stateside was also for our family and for those kids as well. And there was a paradox in that, a dichotomy.
I remember I was in California, so we did lots of Mexico mission trips back in the day. And, after you do like VBS or you build something in Mexico, we did one time on the way back, just before we crossed the border, we stopped in the park, we had lunch, and then we were sent out in twos to go through the park there in Mexico and share our faith. And, you have like 2 or 3 years of high school Spanish under your belt and you struggle through the whole thing. And we debriefed, came back, and I remember the youth pastor asking, he said, "How was that experience?" It was kind of frustrating, didn't ever really understand everything. But he said, "Guess what? You guys are going to be going across the border in a couple of hours, and you're going to be in a country where everybody speaks the same language as you." And, because he was saying, like, what would you do if you could actually speak Spanish? We're like, "Oh, we would tell everybody." And it's like, well, guess what? So it was the total setup, right, that he got us. But coming back and kind of repositioning, like you have a new set of lenses on what it looks like to be missionaries in your own home. I'm just curious, like tell me all about, because the missionary world is its own thing. The people that come back, I haven't lived it. I've gone on mission trips for a couple of weeks and come back and you try to like tell everybody what you just encountered. But there's something totally different, right? Like the kids are called third culture kids, right? Because there's this other, it's just something we don't have a lot of other things in ministry that are exactly like this. So what's the impact? Like, what does it feel like? And like, what is it like for you guys individually? What's it like for your marriage coming back? What's it like for your kids who wanted to go back and maybe had some roots already, like being dug in Germany? What's transition like? Like, help us get inside of the family perspective on transition for a missionary family.
Yeah, I would say first of all, reverse culture shock is real, and I think it's worse than initial culture shock.
Yes.
When you go somewhere and you go somewhere new, you have that culture shock moment, but you don't really have an expectation of what you're getting into necessarily. It's all new and you're figuring it out. Coming back, you're coming back into something that's familiar, but it's not the same. It's changed in the time you've been gone, and you've changed in the time you've been gone. And so the person that you bring back is different. The culture you enter back into is different, but yet somewhere inside of you, you feel like you should know what it's supposed to be because it's familiar, and it's not. And so we had almost a little bit of a different experience than you on your mission trip. We were coming back into a country where we felt like we didn't speak the same language as everybody anymore. We felt like we were speaking a whole different language, but we should be speaking the same language, and we weren't. And that can create some tension.
You guys left before COVID and came back after COVID, right? Which
So
was everything changed for everybody, even living here.
everything.
Yes.
So that time period, that 2016 to 2023, you had COVID, George Floyd, Trump's first election. There was so much disruption in the American culture. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I always use the analogy that we were fish that lived in the fishbowl, and we were removed out of that fishbowl, but yet we could, coming back, we could still look into that fishbowl, and we understood it because we were fish. We just no longer lived in it. And to me, that was the best way that I could describe it. We had somebody say to us as we were still in transition, and we were pretty disrupted ourselves, and we were talking about kind of this new set of lens that we see like through now. And it's like this light bulb went above his head, and he said, "You didn't just go out on a mission trip and come back and have a new perspective. You went out you went out and lived, and you've come back and you have a way of living." And we said, "Yes, we have a way of living." And I think now that we've been back for coming up July will be 3 years, I think we try, or at least I'll speak for myself, I try to keep making myself blend in and fit into this culture that is around me, and to live up to the expectations that myself or my family is supposed to have. And it's really just trying to succumb to a false Eden over and over and over again. And the reality of it is that I don't belong here. Nate doesn't belong here. None of us really belong here. But when I live out the person that I have become, my whole self, I don't just blend in anymore. And that actually is a good thing. It's a God-given gift. When I can recognize that and fully embrace that, it's beautiful and it's peaceful. It's when I continue to make my family fit in and make our marriage and make my lifestyle blend in with everybody around me. That's when I become so disruptive, because it's not true to who I am. To me, it goes back to Nate and I described it as well when we were first coming back stateside. It was, if you've been in a workout program and you get really in shape and maybe you've put on muscle weight or you've lost weight, your clothes just don't fit anymore. And we were coming back stateside trying to put on old clothes, and they just did not fit anymore. I liken it to the Bible verse about trying to put old wine in new wineskins, and it doesn't work. And so I think if you were a missionary sitting across the table, or if you were about to come stateside, I think the thing that I would encourage you in is that it's okay not to fit in, and it's okay to feel really disrupted, and it's okay that your language doesn't exactly match the cultural language around you. And it's okay to ask people to take you off the pedestal that they've placed you on and the expectations that they have on you. It's okay for you to have those conversations and to be the new wine that the Lord has created.
Yeah. Were your kids stoked Were they like, we're going back to America. Let's go to Disneyland. We're going to, we have Nashville hot chicken. Who knows? But like, what was their like initial response? And was there a struggle? Like one of the things that we talk about is that it's not just the it's the pastor or the couple that's transitioning, but like transition's hard for kids too, right? But like, what was their experience of all of that?
I think our oldest was stoked. He was excited. He was older. They were 11, 8, and 5 when we moved to Germany. And so he was going to be here for his last year of high school and then move on into college. So he held on to his I'm an American more than anybody, I think. Our middle one had a really hard time with it. He had created really deep friendships over there, and he did not want to come back at all. And so that came out all kinds of sideways that just led to some really hard years in his transition. And then our daughter, our youngest, she was 5 when we moved over. And so most of her formative years were in German culture. So coming back, she kind of felt, she didn't really remember that initial transition as much. So this felt like more of her first big transition. And culturally, she was a little more German than she was American, very direct, not a whole lot of fluff in her conversation. So we had a lot of conversations that say, maybe don't say that quite so directly to somebody. But she was also taken aback sometimes just at people's nicety and Southern hospitality, because she would go, oh, people are just so nice. And it's like, your face did this thing when you said that. And that didn't seem like that was good. What? Tell me more about that. She's like, I just don't know. Like, is it real? Do they mean it? And she could just sense this thing because she was so used to very direct conversation. And even in school, she was having a math test and was just having trouble. And we came home and asked her about it. And we're talking to the teacher. And she goes, I had no idea what to do with this question. It was a bag of dog food question. And they said it was so many pounds and you had to divide it out into so many different sets of like so many ounces. And she goes, I didn't even know what that is. What are pounds and ounces? Well, she was used to kilograms and grams. And so we learned a lot in those moments to go, in many ways, like she's more of English as a second language kind of a kid, to go, there are things that she won't get that other kids just grew up with that she's going to have to learn and figure out.
I think allowing each one of our kids to process it in their own capacity and meet them where they were inside their process was helpful. I read a line in a book one time, and before I say that quote, we were given the opportunity as we moved back stateside, we entered back into the community that had launched us. And so we were moving back into the neighborhood. Our kids would be returning to the school with their childhood friends. And while it sounded like to us when we were first starting that this might be this utopia experience. It didn't allow all of us to afford the opportunity to be the new people in which we were. I almost think it would be easier to transition back to a community that doesn't know your former self and be able to start over, even though there was lots of comfort that we needed inside of that known community as well. But I read a line in a book, and I said it during family breakfast one morning. The line in the book said, and before I know it, 7 years have passed, and yet I'm standing next to my childhood bed, and it's as if all the years have collided together up until this moment. And that felt so true. It was like an accordion had happened. 7 years of life had passed, but we came back into this community, and our community, unbeknownst to them, and had worked really hard not to, but accordioned our lives together and wanted us to be these people that we were, that they formerly knew. And that was really hard on all 5 of us. And we absorbed that all in different capacities.
What responsibility does the church have, if any, to support the mental health, right? Like there's in that transition phase, and whether it's just you're coming home for 6 months, 3 months, a couple weeks, like is there something that churches can do better when it comes to supporting missionaries in transition seasons?
I simply love that you asked that question. And I would answer it twofold. Our church, our sending church. They actually have a soul care ministry that's tied to them. They provided so many sessions for Nate and myself. And as we inquired about it, because our kids definitely needed someone to talk to as well, they extended that so many sessions for our kids. So I want to fully acknowledge that from our church body. I also want to say that we were tremendously blessed that we didn't have housing to return to, but our loving community came around us and we found a rental home, and they literally furnished our entire house by pieces of furniture that were extra in their house and walls and artwork and or they would say, you need bedding, create an Amazon list and bought us stuff. That is very unusual to the normal missionary story. So I don't want to, the second part of what I'm going to say is more of a cultural norm. And I want to fully acknowledge what how we were embraced. I would say that the church is not sure what to do with missionaries that return as a whole.
I don't even know that sending organizations are really prepared for what to do. You come back as a missionary with a missionary heart, and just because your work in the field is done, it doesn't mean you stop being that missionary person. And so you're coming back going, how do I live this out now in this context? And nobody really understands that or has an off-ramp for that, for a way to live that out.
I think the church has a concept that missionaries go and send, and America does that really well. But America as a nation is the number one place that several nations are starting to send missionaries here. And post-Christian society is growing. It's not just in major cities that are coastal, but it is from coast to coast at this point. And it doesn't matter whether your missionary has served in a third world country or a first world. They're coming back with a set of tools that can equip the church body to live in a capacity that's not just being live sent or that we should all live missional, but actually has tangible ideas and resources when given the opportunity to be able to communicate, that is how to disciple people that are not yet believers into a relationship with believers that can lead them to the foot of the cross of Jesus. And when we stop treating missionaries as if they're just returning with a field report and start treating missionaries as if they are actually consultants for our church bodies and consultants for how to engage not yet believers, it will actually just be radical inside our church bodies.
I agree. I think that's so powerful. It's an interesting piece when we look at that process of return. And you're coming back. You went to Germany to go serve this post-Christian culture, and now you're coming back to America that's post-Christian or evolving into even just, and maybe it's a little bit outside of the scope of the conversation, but I think it's we have church people listening, so I think this is important. But what did you see in the post-Christian Europe that is, because everyone's saying what we're seeing in Europe is making its way across the Atlantic and it's going to hit us. And they're talking about the rise of Islam. They're talking about the churches emptying, and they're saying everything's coming here. But do you see that? Did you see that there? Do you see that even more so here? And what's kind of the warning point for us to live as Christians here missionally and have that mindset that we're not just a sending country, but now we are the recipients of missions efforts?
Yeah, we definitely saw that there. Where we were, I would say it was less than 2% that would be considered relational, Jesus-following Christian. And so we were in a place that was very much different than we were. And I will say they've been there. So people would say maybe they were 20 years ahead of where we are in America. I would say maybe that gap is closing. Maybe they're only 10 years ahead of where we are. We're catching up quickly. I think for me, the difference that I see in those two areas and ways, they're there, they've been there, they've gone through any of those hard transition things, and it just is kind of an accepted reality. Here, you get more of that friction point that's happening in the transition. There's more hostility in the post-Christianity here than maybe we face there. So what we might run into there, to be really honest, it was people that kind of forgot that they'd forgotten God. And it wasn't that they were so anti something. They were really just I don't know. I never really thought about it. And that allowed for just some really interesting, honest conversation that they were willing to engage in. I think some of the difference here is it has been so hostile between the two groups that, and there's been a lot, for good reason, there's been a lot of mistrust developed between non-believers in the church and just things that have been mishandled and hurt that's been caused, that there isn't that ease of conversation. There is a hostility and a being against something at this point. And so I think that's a difference, but I think it's one that can be overcome with intentional relationship.
So you guys come back and you're in transition and you have a support base. People have been supporting you and helping you to live out life in Germany. And then you guys come back and you're in this transition season. And what does that do for support? What does that do for community? I'm assuming that right now.
You're just opening the can of worms with all these questions.
Oh, no. First of all, we have so many amazing supporters that have been with us for years that we call dear friends now. It's amazing. Someone said that one of the hardest parts about no longer living on support is missing those relationships with people. And we absolutely understand where that comes from. They're like family and are just intimate parts of your life. And so we had many people that supported us so generously while we were there. And yet that transition back, their heart is for international missions.
Right.
We are no longer international missions. We're national missions. And that's different. And so they have to go where God is calling and leading them. And so often that might look like losing support for us, but someone else who is an international missionary gains support. And so we've learned to really hold that loosely. God taught us that a lot as we were initially raising support to go to the field. He does it. He's already got what we need out there, and we just get to trust him that he's going to show up and provide when we need it. And he has, and he's been faithful to do that. But you do watch your support start to do this, and that gets really hard, especially people that, they know you and you know them and you love each other. It's just God's moving you in different directions.
And I would honestly say we've had some really hard conversations. And in the beginning, we could not quite articulate what the Lord was calling us to. We just knew that this is what was next for us. And because we couldn't clearly articulate that, people didn't understand and they left. And I get that. They want to be good stewards with their money. There were just some hard conversations in that. We've had people say some really hurtful things inside that as well. And we've seen those same people that say hurtful things come back to us and say, I've seen it from a different side. I get it. And I understand what you're doing. And we've watched the Lord redeem those friendships again. Living on 100% support is this beautiful thing because you get to see the fullness of God's economy. You get to see the giving and the blessing and the stewardship, the sacrifices, the seed of the missionary. There is nothing more beautiful than the eye of the Lord's economy inside of that. And with anything this side of heaven, there can be pain points in that as well.
Besides, so thankful for your community of support on the counseling side of things, but you also needed other support, right? So that as the financial support is going down, the need for a job and a career and paying the bills is now going up. It's great. The house is furnished. Those are all these, we didn't even know how all of this was going to happen, and it starts dropping in your lap. But one of the things that we're doing with Ministry Transitions, we help in the areas of career, coaching, and counseling. But I almost have this picture of after Jesus is crucified and he's resurrected again. Well, you have the disciples go, well, I guess I'll just go back to fishing. And, is there, Nate, for you, is there this let me see where the pharmaceutical market is at, or I guess I'll make a resume. How did you start to figure that out?
Yeah. Honestly, it was it was, again, God just kind of moving things and shifting things. And so it was a process of continuing to pursue what does it look like to keep living out as a missionary in our own home country, and realizing that was not going to sustain us at this point. There were things that still needed to grow and develop. Part of it was our own learning of language and culture, again, as we've come back into American culture a second time and going, we need to learn how to communicate well in that. And we needed time for that. And so in that process, as we ended up getting connected to a local church body here, then getting plugged in, and just was approached by one of the people on staff there about a role that came up as an area pastor here at our church's Church of the City here in Franklin, Tennessee.
Great
And
church.
yeah, it's a great church. And so it became one of these things of going, man, do these things fit together? Kind of this calling that we have and this role that has come available, and just taking that to the Lord and become really clear that there were things, yeah, absolutely, that there's a lot of overlap in our heart and the heart of this church. And it was absolutely the right step at that point that God was saying, hey, this is something that I want to use to grow things in you, to provide for you, and for you to give back to the church as well.
hmm I think it's really easy to allow your fear to outrun your faith when you're in those transitions. You watch those bank accounts get really close to zero, and whew, talk about fear at that point. And I think Nate and I had a lot of conversations as well about what was his gifting, what was my gifting, what were the needs of our kids in that season, and just being really intentional to look around us. What were the doors that the Lord was opening? What were the doors that he was closing? There were many days that it felt like more doors were closed than they were open. And again, we had to go back to what did we witness in that 15-month time period that originally called us out to the field? And then we had to go back to what were the things that we learned while we were on the field? And are we willing to go back to those places to say, if it was true then it's true today and it'll be true in the future, and be willing to rest and abide. We love young adults. A lot of our ministry now is with young adults, and we tell them all the time, they'll come to us and they're like, I have this decision. What do I do with my job? And I always tell them that, imagine yourself, you're in a rowboat, and man, waiting is not passive. Waiting is active. And what does that look like? It means that you sit in your rowboat and you hoist your sailboat and you hoist that sail up as high as it's going to go. And you put your hands on the oars, but you don't row. You wait until the Lord starts sending that wind to blow into that sail that starts pushing that boat. And then he's going to say, paddle with the right, paddle with the left. And then you start paddling and you move in your boat. But actively waiting on the Lord is sitting in that sailboat, ready to perceive with your sail up where the winds of the Spirit are going to.
Yeah. We're going to wrap, but I want to know about Bruns Tribe. So your last name is Bruns, Nate and Brittany Bruns, but you guys are doing something that is heavy on your heart and is really all about what the Lord's taught you guys in the last couple of years. Tell me more.
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. Our ministry is really twofold. We are the Bruns Tribe. It's BRUNS tribe.com if you wanted to learn more information. We are passionate about two things. First and foremost, we're passionate about teaching followers of Christ how to engage the spiritually disengaged. We write a story letter as well as a Dare to Be Awkward newsletter to share the stories from the field and what that looks like. We have a workshop that's called Engaging the Disengaged, where we really teach followers of Jesus, moms and dads and CEOs, what does it look like to start engaging those around you that have walked away from their faith, that are disillusioned with the church, that maybe have hurt. Have those conversations. And the other side of our ministry is really engaging with those that are distanced from the church, that are spiritually disengaged. I call that meal with a mom. And I specifically target young adult women that are ages 22 to 27 years of age. I intentionally have coffee with them and a meal, and I'm just sitting to listen and create safe space for them to ask the questions that they have. That's a really transitional season of life. Hold the tension between what they're feeling as well. They're wanting to have conversation with a mom, just not their mom. And so I'm always looking for other women that understand this mission, that have a heart for young adults, to partner with me in that as well. And so more information's out on our website.
Great. Well, thank you guys for sharing your story. Thank you for leaning into some of the awkward and some of the hard, and maybe even reliving some of the painful, but it is good. And we see in the midst of all of this that God is faithful, that God is gracious, that God meets us in these seasons. And I hope for the missionaries out there who are listening, whether they're thinking about, and being a pastor for years, I know that there are lots of things, lots of reasons that will take a missionary family off the field. And that could be their kids. It could be sickness. It could be support. But as a parting, like, encouragement, what would you say to a missionary family that's just in transition and they are just deathly afraid of what's next?
Trust. Like, the God that got you there is the one that's going to get you back here. I would just say trust is probably the biggest thing. It's hard. You have to remember often to be able to do that. Go back to the places that he showed up. Remember. It's one of the biggest, most repeated commandments in the Bible is to remember. And so I would say do that. Force yourself to remember.
I would tell them your fear is valid. Your sorrow and your grief is so real and it's tangible, but I promise it will not sink your ship. There is light. There is light.
Love it. Hey, thank you guys for joining us. And I pray it's an encouragement for everybody who's listening. Check out the BrunsTribe.com and see what Nate and Brittany are up to. And if you're around Franklin, stop in at Church of the City. It's a good place.
John, stop in and say hi. Thanks for having us, Matt.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, guys. So this conversation surfaces something. It's a question that I think a lot of leaders are wondering inside. It's a little scarier to name out loud. And the question is, if this chapter is ending, does that mean my calling is ending too? Their story reminds us that God is often far more committed to our formation than our location. You can have a country that changed, the assignment that changed, the context that changed, but God can keep that calling remained intact. And maybe that's an encouragement for someone listening today. If God is leading you through a transition, don't assume he's taking away your purpose. He may still be inviting you to live it somewhere new. If you're navigating a ministry transition, you're trying to discern what comes next, we'd love to help. Start a conversation with us at Ministry Transitions. Sometimes the clearest next step begins by talking it through with someone who's walked that road before. If you are a missionary or a mission-sending organization, you are in flux. You know what change is, you know what transition is, and we would love to have a conversation with you to be able to help take those next steps. Maybe even get you connected with Nate and Brittany. Thanks for listening. My name is Matt Davis, and this is the Life After Ministry podcast.